On February 2, 2025, President Donald Trump made a significant announcement regarding tariffs on imports from China, Canada, and Mexico, marking a pivotal shift in U.S. trade policy. As part of this policy, the long-standing de minimis exemption, which allowed goods valued at less than $800 to enter the United States duty-free, was eliminated. This change is expected to have severe repercussions for low-cost e-commerce retailers such as Temu, Shein, and Alibaba, which have thrived under this provision. Background on de minimis and its impact. The de minimis rule has been a crucial factor in the growth of Chinese e-commerce companies, enabling them to ship millions of packages to U.S. consumers without incurring tariffs. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection (CBP), over 1.4 billion de minimis shipments were processed in the fiscal year 2024. A dramatic increase attributed to budget retailers like Temu and Shein. These companies, which ship products directly to consumers, have managed to capitalize on this loophole, allowing them to offer significantly lower prices compared to domestic retailers. Lawmakers have increasingly scrutinized the de minimis provision, arguing that it has enabled foreign companies to undercut American retailers while also raising concerns about product safety and the potential for illegal goods, particularly fentanyl, to evade customs scrutiny. The Trump administration justified the elimination of the exemption by asserting the need to recover lost tariff revenues and enhance border security. Announcement of new tariffs. During a press conference, President Trump announced the imposition of a 10% tariff on imports from China, along with a 25% tariff on goods from Canada and Mexico. The tariffs are set to take effect shortly, and the elimination of the de minimis exemption is expected to directly impact the business models of retailers like Temu and Shein, which rely on low margins and quick delivery to attract cost-sensitive consumers. Experts have raised alarm over how these changes could disrupt the established practices of these retailers. Temu, which has become a popular platform for consumers seeking affordable products, has already begun adjusting its business strategy in anticipation of the tariffs. The company has started shipping inventory in bulk to U.S. warehouses to mitigate the impact of the new tariff structure. Similarly, Shein has been working to establish distribution centers in the U.S. to improve delivery times and reduce costs. Reactions and implications. The reaction to Trump's announcement has been mixed, with varying perspectives on the broader implications of the tariffs. CNBC reported that platforms like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy could benefit from the clampdown on cheaper competitors, while Fortune highlighted that the tariffs could disproportionately affect lower-income consumers who rely on affordable goods. Critics of the de minimis loophole argue that it has allowed companies like Temu and Shein to build their business models around evading tariffs, ultimately undermining American retailers. A congressional investigation into these companies raised serious concerns about their supply chains, suggesting that many products might be made with forced labor in China. Future outlook. As the new tariffs take effect, analysts predict that Temu and Shein may have to pass on the increased costs to American consumers, potentially leading to higher prices for their goods. The question remains whether consumers will be willing to pay more for items that were previously available at significantly lower prices. Additionally, the elimination of the de minimis exemption could reshape the landscape of online retail, particularly for companies heavily reliant on low-cost imports from China. The full effects of these tariffs are yet to be realized, but they signal a new phase in U.S.-China trade relations amidst ongoing scrutiny of foreign e-commerce practices and their impact on American consumers. Conclusion. The announcement of new tariffs and the elimination of the de minimis provision represent a critical turning point in U.S. trade policy. As Temu, Shein, and similar companies face the repercussions, the future of low-cost e-commerce in the U.S. hangs in the balance. The shift not only affects these retailers but also poses significant implications for American consumers, particularly those who depend on affordable goods in an increasingly competitive marketplace. The evolving dynamics of international trade and domestic retail will continue to unfold in the coming months, as all stakeholders adapt to the new regulatory environment. The announcement of a 10% tariff on Chinese imports by President Donald Trump in February 2025, coupled with the elimination of the de minimis exemption for packages valued under $800, represents a significant shift in U.S. trade policy. This change is particularly detrimental to e-commerce giants such as Temu, Shein and Taobao, which have thrived under the previous regulations that allowed them to ship products to American consumers without incurring tariffs. The implications of this decision are profound, affecting the pricing strategies of these retailers and potentially reshaping the landscape of online shopping in the U.S. Counterintuitive implications. 1. Tariffs and consumer prices. While tariffs are generally seen as a means to protect domestic industries by making foreign goods more expensive, the immediate effect of these tariffs may not be straightforward. Many consumers have become accustomed to the incredibly low prices offered by Chinese retailers. As these companies face increased costs due to tariffs, there is a significant question about whether consumers will still be willing to purchase these goods at higher prices. This could lead to a paradox where the intended protection of domestic industries results in reduced purchasing power for lower-income consumers who rely on affordable goods from these e-commerce platforms. 2. Impact on domestic retailers. The tariffs are expected to benefit platforms like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, which could gain a competitive edge as lower-cost competitors like Temu and Shein are squeezed out of the market. However, this does not necessarily mean that domestic retailers will uniformly benefit. If lower-income consumers are priced out of the market for inexpensive goods, they may turn to second-hand markets or discount stores, which could disrupt traditional retail dynamics altogether. Thus, the tariff policy could inadvertently harm the very retailers it aims to support. 3. Shifting business models. In response to the tariffs, companies like Temu are already shifting their business strategies, such as increasing bulk shipments to U.S. warehouses. This model may mitigate some of the tariff impacts but could also lead to inefficiencies and increased operational costs, which might not be sustainable in the long term. The reliance on a factory-to-consumer model, which has been a hallmark of these companies, may need to evolve into a hybrid model that incorporates more local warehousing and fulfillment strategies. This change is counterintuitive because it directly contradicts the very foundation of their low-cost business models. 4. Supply chain and labor practices. The crackdown on the de minimis exemption also raises ethical questions regarding the supply chains of these retailers. U.S. lawmakers have previously expressed concerns about forced labor in the production processes of Temu and Shein. The increased scrutiny and costs associated with tariffs may compel these companies to reassess their supply chains, potentially leading to increased operational transparency and ethical sourcing practices. This potential shift towards more responsible business practices is counterintuitive, considering the initial drive to maximize profits at all costs. 5. Market dynamics and consumer behavior. The removal of the de minimis exemption could create a significant shift in consumer behavior. As prices rise, consumers may become more selective about their purchases, potentially leading to a decrease in overall consumption of non-essential goods. This could result in a slowing of sales growth for companies like Temu and Shein, which have thrived on high-volume, low-margin sales. The counterintuitive aspect here is that a tariff designed to protect domestic interests might inadvertently lead to a contraction in consumer spending, which could hurt the overall economy. 6. Broader trade relations. The tariffs are part of a broader strategy to recalibrate U.S. trade relations, particularly with China. However, the consequences could extend beyond just e-commerce. Other sectors that rely on Chinese imports may also face disruptions, leading to a cascading effect throughout the supply chain. The expectation that tariffs will lead to a stronger domestic manufacturing base might not materialize if companies are unable to source necessary components or materials at competitive prices. 7. Legislative and regulatory responses. As the tariff changes take effect, there could be significant political and regulatory pushback. Lawmakers who initially supported the tariffs might face backlash from constituents who are unhappy with rising prices. This dynamic could lead to further legislative attempts to either mitigate the impact of the tariffs or to introduce new regulations that could complicate the landscape for e-commerce retailers. The counterintuitive nature of political support for tariffs might wane as the direct impact on voters becomes apparent. 8. Consumer awareness and ethical consumption. The heightened scrutiny surrounding the practices of companies like Temu and Shein may lead to increased consumer awareness about sourcing practices and labor conditions. This awareness could drive a shift towards more ethical consumption patterns where consumers prioritize products from companies that demonstrate responsible sourcing and labor practices. The counterintuitive aspect is that the push for lower prices has often come at the expense of ethical considerations. But tariffs could elevate these issues in consumer consciousness. Conclusion. The recent changes to the U.S. tariff structure, particularly the elimination of the de minimis exemption, present a complex set of implications that extend beyond simple economic calculations. As e-commerce giants like Temu and Shein navigate these turbulent waters, the broader impacts on consumer pricing, retail dynamics, and ethical sourcing will unfold in unexpected ways. The counterintuitive nature of these changes highlights the interconnectedness of global trade policies and domestic economic realities, suggesting that the fallout from these tariffs could resonate far beyond the intended targets. The recent changes in U.S. trade policy, particularly the announcement of a 10% tariff on Chinese imports coupled with the elimination of the de minimis exemption, have far-reaching implications for low-cost e-commerce retailers like Temu, Shein, and Alibaba's AliExpress. While many discussions focus on the immediate effects of these tariffs, several critical aspects are often overlooked which bear significant weight on the future landscape of online retail and consumer behavior in the U.S. 1. Historical context of de minimis and its impact on e-commerce. The de minimis provision has been a cornerstone of U.S. trade policy since the 1930s, allowing goods valued under $800 to enter the country without tariffs. This exemption has enabled the rapid growth of budget e-commerce platforms like Temu and Shein, which have thrived on the ability to offer low-priced goods directly to consumers. In fiscal year 2024, over 1.4 billion de minimis shipments were processed, a significant increase that underscores the volume of transactions facilitated by this loophole. By eliminating this provision, the U.S. government is not merely adjusting tariffs, it is fundamentally altering the operational model of these retailers, which rely heavily on low margins and high volume. 2. Consumer behavior and market dynamics. The shift in tariff policy could lead to substantial changes in consumer behavior. As prices for goods from these retailers rise due to the new tariffs, cost-sensitive consumers may turn to alternatives such as Amazon or local retailers that do not depend as heavily on international supply chains. This could result in a decrease in market share for Temu and Shein, especially if American consumers are unwilling to pay higher prices for goods that were previously seen as bargains. Analysts predict that the response from Temu and Shein may include attempts to pass costs on to consumers. But whether shoppers will accept these price increases remains uncertain. This aspect is significant as it may lead to a fundamental shift in the competitive landscape of e-commerce. 3. Logistical adjustments by retailers. In anticipation of the tariffs, both Temu and Shein have begun to adapt their business models. Temu has started increasing its bulk shipments to U.S. warehouses, and Shein is establishing distribution centers within the U.S. These logistical changes are attempts to mitigate the impact of the de minimis rules elimination. However, the costs associated with these adaptations could also lead to increased prices for consumers. This transition period may create a window of opportunity for established retailers like Amazon and eBay to capture market share, especially if they can maintain lower prices or offer faster shipping times. For broader economic implications, the economic ramifications of these tariffs extend beyond the immediate effects on individual retailers. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency's estimates highlight that de minimis shipments accounted for a substantial portion of U.S. imports from China, with significant revenue implications. The elimination of this loophole is projected to enhance tariff revenue collection but may also lead to higher overall consumer prices affecting lower-income consumers who rely on affordable goods. This demographic shift could exacerbate existing socioeconomic disparities, as lower-income households might struggle with the increased cost of living resulting from these tariffs. 5. Political and regulatory context. The motivations behind the Trump administration's tariff strategy include addressing concerns about product safety and the potential influx of illegal goods entering the U.S. through de minimis loopholes. Lawmakers have raised alarms about the ease with which potentially harmful products including fentanyl could evade scrutiny under the old system. This perspective is significant as it frames the tariffs as a national security measure rather than purely an economic one. The political narrative surrounding tariffs may influence public perception and acceptance of price increases as consumers may prioritize safety over cost. 6. Potential for trade retaliation. The imposition of these tariffs could trigger retaliatory measures from China and other affected countries, leading to a broader trade war. If China responds with its own tariffs or trade restrictions, it could further complicate the supply chain dynamics for U.S. retailers, potentially leading to shortages or increased prices for various consumer goods. The interconnected nature of global supply chains means that the effects of these tariffs could ripple through multiple industries, impacting everything from electronics to consumer goods. 7. Long-term viability of fast fashion. The fast fashion model that companies like Shein rely on is fundamentally challenged by these tariffs. The ability to offer ultra-low prices is closely tied to the de minimis exemption, and without it, the business model may become unsustainable. The industry's future may hinge on whether these companies can adapt to a new pricing reality while maintaining their competitive edge. The long-term health of the fast fashion sector in the U.S. may depend on its ability to innovate and find new pathways to profitability that do not rely solely on low-cost imports. In conclusion, the elimination of the de minimis exemption and the imposition of tariffs on Chinese imports represent more than just a policy change. They signal a potential transformation in the landscape of U.S. e-commerce and consumer behavior. The ripple effects of these changes, including shifts in consumer preferences, adjustments in retailer logistics, and broader economic implications, are substantial and warrant careful consideration. As the market adapts to these new realities, the ultimate impact on U.S.-China trade relations and the future of online retail remains to be seen. 1. Impact of tariffs on e-commerce business models. The introduction of a 10% tariff on Chinese imports coupled with the elimination of the de minimis exemption poses significant challenges to low-cost e-commerce retailers like Temu and Shein. These companies have thrived under the previous regime, benefiting from the ability to ship goods valued under $800 duty-free. The new tariffs threaten their low-margin direct-to-consumer business models, potentially forcing them to increase prices, which could alienate their price-sensitive customer base. This shift represents a critical juncture for these retailers, as they will need to adapt their strategies to maintain market share in a potentially less favorable competitive landscape. 2. Legislative and regulatory dynamics. The move to eliminate the de minimis exemption reflects broader legislative and regulatory trends aimed at addressing perceived trade imbalances and safety concerns. Lawmakers have expressed concerns that the de minimis loophole allows foreign companies to undercut domestic retailers and evade regulatory scrutiny, particularly regarding product safety and illegal goods. The justification for these changes also ties into national security concerns, particularly regarding the trafficking of substances like fentanyl. This regulatory shift underscores the complexities of international trade relations and highlights the balance policymakers seek between protecting domestic industries and fostering a competitive market. 3. Shifts in consumer behavior and market dynamics. The anticipated price increases resulting from the new tariffs could alter consumer behavior, particularly among lower-income shoppers who have relied on the affordability of goods from retailers like Temu and Shein. Analysts suggest that American consumers may be less willing to purchase these goods if prices rise significantly. This change could lead to a redistribution of market share among e-commerce platforms, with established players like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy potentially benefiting from the squeeze on budget retailers. The evolving landscape raises questions about the long-term implications for consumer choice and access to affordable products in the retail market. 4. Strategic responses from affected retailers. In anticipation of the new tariffs and the elimination of the de minimis exemption, affected retailers like Temu and Shein have begun to adjust their operational strategies. Temu has increased its bulk shipments to U.S. warehouses, while Shein has established distribution centers within the U.S. These strategic pivots reflect an effort to mitigate the impacts of the new tariffs, enabling these companies to maintain competitive delivery times and potentially lower costs. However, the effectiveness of these strategies in preserving their customer base and market position remains to be seen, especially as they navigate a more complex regulatory environment and shifting consumer expectations. 1. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act 1930. This act raised duties on numerous imported goods to protect American industry during the Great Depression. It imposed heavy tariffs, which led to retaliatory tariffs from other countries, escalating into a trade war. The act is widely blamed for worsening the economic downturn and significantly reducing international trade. 2. The Trade Act of 1974. This act allowed the U.S. to impose tariffs and quotas on imports that were deemed to threaten national security or cause economic harm to American industries. It also led to the establishment of the Office of the United States Trade Representative. The act was used to protect domestic industries from foreign competition and highlighted the tension between free trade and protectionism. 3. Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974. This provision allows the U.S. to impose tariffs on foreign countries that engage in unfair trade practices. It was notably used in the trade conflict between the U.S. and China, where tariffs were imposed on a wide range of Chinese goods in response to intellectual property theft and unfair trade practices. This escalated tensions and led to significant shifts in global trade dynamics. The recent decision by President Donald Trump to impose new tariffs on imports from China, Canada, and Mexico, particularly the removal of the de minimis exemption for packages valued under $800, is poised to significantly reshape the e-commerce landscape, especially for Chinese retailers like Temu, Shein, and Taobao. Here we outline the probable future implications of this policy change. Short-term impacts 2025 to 2026. 1. Increased prices for consumers. The elimination of the de minimis exemption means that low-cost goods from these retailers will now incur a 10% tariff, likely leading to higher prices for U.S. consumers. Retailers may struggle to maintain their low-price models, as passing costs onto consumers could dampen demand. 2. Shifts in retail strategies. Companies like Temu and Shein are already adapting by increasing bulk shipments to U.S. warehouses to mitigate the tariff impact. This shift may lead to an increase in warehousing and logistics costs, altering their supply chain dynamics. 3. Market share dynamics. Traditional retailers like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy could benefit from the tightening of the competitive landscape. As smaller low-margin retailers face increased costs, larger platforms with more robust logistics may capture a greater share of the market. 4. Consumer behavior changes. U.S. consumers, particularly those in lower income brackets who have relied on affordable imports, may begin to turn to alternative sources, including domestic brands or thrift options, as price sensitivity becomes more pronounced. Medium-term effects 2027 to 2030. 1. Market consolidation. We may see a consolidation of e-commerce platforms as smaller and less adaptable companies struggle to compete. Major players with established supply chains and customer bases could absorb the competition. 2. Innovation and adaptation. Retailers will likely innovate in areas like supply chain management and fulfillment strategies to reduce costs and improve efficiency. This could spur advancements in technology and logistics within the e-commerce sector. 3. Regulatory environment. The ongoing scrutiny of foreign e-commerce practices will likely lead to more stringent regulations not only aimed at tariffs but also focusing on product safety and labor practices. Companies will need to invest in compliance measures to avoid penalties. 4. Diverse sourcing strategies. As tariffs increase, retailers may diversify their sourcing strategies, moving away from China to other countries with lower tariffs or developing local supply chains to reduce dependency on Chinese imports. Long-term projections 2031 and beyond. 1. Consumer loyalty and brand value. Over time, consumers may prioritize brand loyalty and values over price, particularly if they associate foreign goods with exploitative practices. This shift could favor domestic brands or those demonstrating ethical supply chain practices. 2. Geopolitical implications. The trade relationship between the US and China will likely continue to be strained, impacting not only e-commerce but also broader economic relations. This could lead to further tariffs or trade barriers in new sectors. 3. E-commerce evolution. The e-commerce landscape may evolve significantly, with a focus on sustainability, ethical sourcing, and transparency becoming key differentiators. Companies that align with these values may capture a growing segment of conscientious consumers. 4. Emerging markets. As U.S. retailers grapple with increased costs, we may see a rise in e-commerce from emerging markets that could fill the void left by Chinese retailers. This could create opportunities for new players to enter the market and offer competitive products. Conclusion. The decision to impose tariffs and eliminate the de minimis exemption marks a significant pivot in U.S. trade policy, particularly affecting Chinese e-commerce companies. The immediate impact will be felt by consumers facing higher prices, but the long-term effects could fundamentally change the dynamics of e-commerce consumer behavior and international trade relations. Retailers will need to innovate and adapt to survive in this new landscape, which could ultimately reshape the global economic order.